Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you to the live audience who are with us tonight, and welcome to everybody joining us online live and those of you who have joined a little later. My name's Andrew Barrett, and we are here tonight at Biotopia, fantastic natural history museum in the heart of Uppsala. I said I'm Andrew Barrett. I run White Wolf Wildlife, which is a nature education and guided tour company. But tonight I am here speaking on behalf of the Rovdjursföreningen Cubs Group Uppsalaland. For those who are not Swedish, myself included, I need this translated. It's the Swedish Carnivore Association Cubs Group, which is the youth group we set up last year. I say youth, it's more like young adults. So tonight we are going to be talking about mustelids. Now I have to confess, first up, some of the photos, well, a lot of the photos in here are not mine. I've managed to lose a hard drive with a lot of my own wildlife photography on, so there are references at the end of the presentation for the photos I have used. Moving on. Right, we're talking about mustelids. I have a proclivity for anything that has four legs, fur, and sharp teeth. I also have a proclivity for those with 8 legs, hair, and fangs, but you'll be safe to know we're not talking about spiders tonight. Right, so what is a mustelid? We've got to make sure that we're in the right area. First off, it's an animal. That's a good start. If it was a plant, I'd be very stuck because this is very much the wrong setup. Moving on, mammal, good, 4 legs and fur, fantastic. Carnivora, thank you, it has sharp teeth. There we go, I'm going to be happy. The Mustelidae family consists of between 66 and 70 species worldwide across 9 subfamilies. Now we have 10 species in Sweden. I'm going to ask you to look at this list, memorize this list. It's going to become important. But importantly, the mustelids classify as a mesopredator. A mesopredator is a mid-ranking predator in a trophic level that preys on smaller species. Now, you may start to argue with me about that definition. It is a definition, not the definition. But I'm also going to try and explain it, what that means. So, look at this. I drew this. This is very happy. Right. Down here is lichen. It's nothing else. It is just lichen. And what we have are the arrows saying who eats who. So up here we have our reindeer with no association or likeness to any other reindeer in fiction or real world standing. This reindeer eats on this lichen, and therefore that is that predation route. Then we have the wolf, our apex predator. Who eats the reindeer? Very easy. Straight line. Good. What we have is this complication over here, which is this little beastie to my right, this wolverine. We'll be talking more about him later. Now, the wolverine likes to eat reindeer. And there are records indeed, mostly from America and Russia, that wolves eat wolverines. It is a thing that happens. So now what we have is we have the producer, takes the sun's energy, produces energy, the consumer, the herbivore, the apex predator, and then this mid-ranking or mid-level predator, mesopredator. Now, I said prey on smaller species. The reindeer, if you can imagine one, is significantly larger than the wolverine, but we'll come on to that later. Now, first up, we have about 50 minutes, so we need to hurry up and meet our characters. Now, as I said, there are 10 species in Sweden. Did you memorize the list? Because I'm going to ask you to start identifying, guys. Don't worry, this is not going to be where we stop the presentation and talk a lot. We will be breaking it down a bit more as we go. But of our 10 species, we have over here the wolverine, the badger, the otter, pine marten, polecat, European mink, American mink, domestic ferret, stoat, and weasel. Now, because we only have a short period of time, some of these guys will be making a Stan Lee-style cameo, popping in briefly before disappearing. But as I said, that's a lot. They all look somewhat similar, long bodies, round ears, little beady eyes. So how do we break them down? We've got to separate them a little bit. We're going to do it by, habitats. Good. So, water. Now, of course, all mammals need water. Living things need water. But of our 10 mustelids, who has a need for water greater than others? So here we have our first 3 out of the list. We have the Eurasian otter, the American mink, and the European mink. A boreal, who's the tree hugger, who lives in the trees. We have the pine marten standing very beautifully on his back legs up there. And we're going to get a little bit complicated now because I'm going to talk about the mountain, and I'm going to show you a wolverine in a tree. Now, there is a lot of overlap between the categories that I'm putting out here. A lot of these animals, for one, all the mustelids can swim, all mammals can swim to some degree. Most can climb to some ability, but this is just a breakdown of what we can use to identify them. So, water, trees, arboreal, mountains. Who's next? Homely. What do I mean by homely? Well, they have a home range. They have a place to live. It is, of course, our badger. And then last up, because I needed to fill the white space, who's in your homes? Well, that should be nice and easy. The domesticated ferret. Now, this is one that we're not going to talk much about. So, have a nice little look at that domesticated ferret there and wave bye-bye, because I think that's the last we'll see of him. Now, that still leaves us some species. Where are they? They're everywhere, and this is who they are. We have the polecat, the stoat, and the weasel. When we come on to the proper breakdown, we will be having the Swedish names and scientific names. Speaking of the breakdown, we can start now. The hungry. So anyone who saw the title of this talk, we know we're talking about the hungry, the smelly, and the slippery. This is the hungry. The wolverine. Gulo gulo is its binomial nomenclature. Gulo comes from the Latin glutton. He is the glutton. He is a hungry little so-and-so. They are said to be voracious consumers, likely due to prey scarcity. When they do find something to eat, they will gorge themselves, expanding their stomach to its maximum extent and just overeating to the absolute max. Well, what do they eat? Well, they're predominantly a scavenger. They live in a very harsh environment. They're up in the mountains. We can see on our map over here, the dashed lines are the presence. This is where they are found. So we have all of the mountains basically up against the Norwegian border. And I saw wolverines there, where that little dot is, if anyone can see that. Roughly about there, up near Armanas. They are a scavenger. They are known for following wolves and lynx, hoping to steal kills. But they are also capable of hunting for themselves. We've all seen the videos of that. We might have seen the videos. You can look online for videos of the wolverine taking down reindeer. Now, some interesting information about that. The wolverine, for example, this little beast I have stood next to me, the males can get anywhere between 11 and 18 kilograms in mass, and the females smaller still at 8 to 12. So 18, 12 kilos, that's a big male and female. The Swedish reindeer range somewhere between 60 and 120 kilograms. So imagining you're a fairly large female wolverine, you can take down a predator literally 10 times your size. Oh, sorry, a prey item literally 10 times your size, which is quite clever. They do this because they have absolutely massive feet. I'm going to see how well, there we are. You can see feet. Right. So, considering this beast is barely as tall as my torso, and this is an average size wolverine, its paw is comparatively sized to mine. Certainly, for its body mass, for its ratio, it has a really large paw. This allows it to run on top of the snow. They can run at quite fast speeds over the snow for a fair duration. I can't remember if it's, I think it was 30 kilometers an hour or something. Maybe it was dropped over the snow. 30 might have been their top speed. I do forget that data. And doing this, due to its height, it'll then grab the back leg, tear the tendons, tear the hamstrings, animal falls over, back of the neck. Back of the neck is important when we're talking about mustelids. It's what they do. Right, what else do we want to know about Mr. Wolverine? Den sites in mountains. Yes, so, mountains, again, from the map. They live in mountains. They have den sites up there. The wolverine will have multiple den sites, multiple places it'll go and sit and rest. And then when the mother is pregnant with the cubs, she will find a more substantial den, normally under snow, under a fallen tree or something like that. A bit more comfortable where she can stay for a bit longer. But I need to talk about breeding. The mating happens during the summer, but the implantation so the fertilized egg being implanted into the female and starting to grow, is delayed up to until the early winter. So it could be anything up to 4 months delayed. Then, so once it's been implanted in the winter, the female is in this new extensive, nice den of hers. 2 or 3 kits are born in the spring. The fathers, see, I need to have more pictures. The fathers will have a territory that covers over 2 or 3 females' territories, and he will form a lifelong partnership with, here we are, yeah, successful males pair for life with 2 or 3 females, so they will therefore share across these territories. When the cubs are born, the father, kits, they are kits, not cubs. When the kits are born, the father will then go to each of the dens and visit them within the first 10 weeks, a few times during the first 10 weeks, and then he'll leave them alone. But once they reach the age of about 6 months, the kits can choose to go with dad or stay with mum. So if you're up in the mountains and you see a big wolverine with a little wolverine, you can't assume it's mother offspring. It could be father offspring above the ages of 6 months. And they will stay with their respective parent for a period of time, normally through the first winter. And the kits do grow to full size by their first winter. If they didn't, they wouldn't survive. So that is the hungry. Yes. Did I have any other information I needed? No. Yes. Roughly speaking, estimations at the moment say there are between 600 and 700 individuals in Sweden. Now, of course, because they're on this mountain range, sharing the mountains of Norrbotten, Västerbotten, Jämtland, but they've also now spread down to Dalarna as well, so they're coming across here a bit. We have a lot of shared wolverines with the Norwegian population as well. So exactly how they draw that line, I'm not certain, but they say 600 to 700 individuals. Right, the mountains are cold. Let's go somewhere wet. Right, we're going on to the slippery. We're looking at our wet pool noodles, as it were. So again, here we have the otter, the European mink, and the American mink. Now, we're going to, let's just put up all this information and then we can talk freely. There we are. 2 screens, confuse me. Right, so the otter, that's this guy up here, Lutra. They say there's about 1,500 to 2,000 individuals in Sweden. I'll show you the maps of these population distributions shortly. But it's a fair-sized animal. It can get up to about 1 meter long, not including the tail. The tail is again another, I think it's 30 centimeters. 7 to 12 kilograms in weight, in mass. That's it's a fairly sizable creature. It's a similar sort of size to the wolverine, but it's obviously working around the rivers and water and freshwater systems. Due to this, its diet is primarily fish. It eats a lot of fish, and we'll come on to how that's important when we do the survey techniques later. The American mink, that's this skinny one down here. He has a longer tail than his European counterpart. So the European tail is about 40% of its body length. This guy's tail is 40% of his body length. This guy's tail comes in at about, I think it was 56% of his body length, averaging. But they're a smaller animal. They are half the size of an otter, reaching lengths of about 45 centimeters total. So up to half a meter, and very much lighter, between 0.5 kilogram and 1.5 kilograms for males in the winter, and 400 to about 800 grams for the females in winter. They bulk up a lot in the autumn, putting on a lot of extra weight, so that's when the weight is highest, before they have to then suffer through the winter, trying to live off their reserves and also hunting as they go. The American mink eats everything. It is a truly voracious consumer of anything that moves. Like the European mink, they eat a lot of riparian mammals. Voles, shrews, mice make up a large part of the diet, but also amphibians, fish, small birds, eggs, anything that they can get their hands on, anything with protein in. The European European mink, this guy up here, they're struggling a bit. there aren't so many of them. In fact, we don't know exactly how many of them there are in Sweden. I couldn't find good literature with good results. They say there are 30,000 total worldwide. There's about 15,000 in Russia. There's about 1,000 in France and about 1,000 in Germany. So where the other 12,000 odd are, 13,000 odd are, we don't know. But the population map doesn't have a distribution in Sweden. If you look at the ICUN red list, the population is limited to more southern central parts of Europe. So this guy is well and truly being kicked out. Possibly, mostly, by the American mink, who is outcompeting it. The American mink has escaped from fur farms. We see up here on the slide, it says 17,000 escaped from a fur farm in Sweden in 2010. And then during the COVID problem, during the COVID situation, they actually suspended fur farming temporarily in 2021 due to finding COVID within the farm. So fur farming still happens and there are still mink being farmed for fur in Sweden. But due to the fact that such a large number can escape in one event in 2010, we have no idea how many of them would have survived, how far they would have traveled, have they successfully integrated themselves into the population. We can have a look at that. That is the mink distribution. They are now everywhere. So we don't actually know how many American mink there are. We don't think there are any European mink, but we think the American mink is everywhere. The otter population, as I said, there was about up to 2,000 individuals in Sweden. Lots in the north, getting a little bit more sparsely populated coming down the mountainous regions. And then we have a few little lines right here. So whilst we have this blank spot above us, and then here around Upplands, Stockholm, Uppsala area, there are suitable records for otter. Now, I have used Jörgen's Spar tracking book as one of the references for this information, as well as the ICUN Red List and Artdatabanken. Artdataportalen? No, Artportalen, yeah. Words. So, that's the distribution of our slipperies. Slippery, obviously, because they're wet. The fur doesn't get wet due to an oil they have in it. I can't remember what the oil is, but basically they have nice... It does get wet, because this guy looks quite drowned and wet. But they don't get cold. They have an underlayer of softer, downier fur, which is warm and soft and dry due to this. And that's why this guy is farmed for his fur so excessively. Right, moving on. Who's left? We've done the hungry. We've done the slippery. Ah, yes, the smellies. So this is the group I threw in as everybody else earlier, or everywhere else, because they're everywhere. They are. Now what we have is, we have the polecat. That's this colourful guy up here. He looks like a burglar with that mask. He's very cute. He was obviously domesticated for the domestic ferret. Some 2,500, 2,000 years ago, something. Someone started catching up the polecat and domesticating them. And that's where the ferret comes from. That's why a lot of ferrets have these polecat colours. In Johnny Burke's book on polecats, which I have here, which we can look at later, he describes the difficulties and the problems in separating true polecats and ferrety polecats and polecatty ferrets. 3 groups. Very complicated. Right. Their population data. We only have hunting data from them. Okay. So in the 80s, 1,500 were hunted every year during the 80s. Then during the 90s, 5,000 were hunted every year. So we've seen a massive increase in hunting success, in shooting predominantly. It reduced after that, and what they saw was something interesting called the increasing between the 80s and the 90s coincided with a variant of fox mange that ripped through Sweden and sort of northern Europe, reducing and killing off foxes. So the fox reduced and the polecat looked to increase. Now, of course, hunting data can be taken with a heavy pinch of salt. For one, we don't know if everyone always accurately recorded what was hunted and killed. And of course, when you hunt something and kill it, you remove it from the population and remove it from the breeding population. So There are some complicated calculations you can do, assuming breeding coefficiency, and if you see one, then you've probably missed X number. But as it is, we don't actually have a number for the polecat. Stoat ermeline. This is a fun little guy. Right. For those of you who are sitting in front of me, he's the bigger of the two minis. He's the big one down there. Oh, I probably shouldn't pick him up by his neck. This one looks a little bit frazzled. He looks like he's had a little bit too much of a night out, but he'll be fine. He'll cope. The stoat ermeline. Right, what do we know? We don't know the population. That's a very interesting little problem to have. We don't know the population. Again, we're looking at hunting data. So about 6,000 were shot per year in the 1950s, and it had no sign of significant population change. That is to say, they shot 6,000, and they kept shooting 6,000, and they kept shooting 6,000. So apparently 6,000 wasn't doing enough damage to the population to reduce it, because otherwise you'd start to see lower success rates. Now we have some data in, it is Artdatabanken that I looked at, because it was recorded 130 to 160 were recorded in citizen science each year for the last 5 years. That's across the entire Sweden. So we're not seeing many of them. We don't know how many there are. We could be seeing all of them, but it's unlikely. We're not seeing a lot of them. And we will come on to citizen science work that you guys can do later. So we don't know his population, but he's very cute. He's got these very round ears. He's very good at hearing sounds. And because of his very slim, long body, like all the mustelids, they're very good at going down holes. So they really like to eat voles, mice, shrews, particularly voles. Let's just assume voles. That can be shared with the next guy. In fact, all three of these, they eat pretty much the same thing. They'll grab bird eggs if they can. They'll eat birds if they can. But if you give them choices, they will often enough pick a shrew. No, a vole. Small, rodenty, runs around, has squeaks. Right. All we know about the weasel, again, we don't know its population. We have the same data as we do for stoats, and I believe that there was a species confusion at the time, because the exact same wording was used to describe 6,000 shot per year in the 1950s with no significant population change. There could well have easily been a population species identification problem. But these guys, they all hunt voles, and you might have seen videos of things like stoats, who are quite small, hunting things like rabbits, which are somewhat bigger, 4 or 5 times the mass of it. They do this, and I've put up there the word dancing queen. They can do this wiggle dance thing. It can be used to confuse the prey which they're attacking. If you don't run directly at something, it doesn't know where you're going. It can't predict if you're going at it or somewhere else. So if you stand there and kind of just twist and loop and do something funky, it stands there until you somehow manage to get close enough, jump on its back, bite the back of its neck. These guys are fantastic hunters, can carry and kill much over their own body mass. And they need to eat a lot. The weasel, there was a recording on one of the, I think it was BBC program. It had to eat, it killed something like 8 or 12 voles in a night, grab them, run them back to a hollow log which it was living in, eat the brain, leave the body, go back out, get some more. The brain, lots of fat, lots of blood, high energy. Grab that, and then it fell asleep in the same log and spent its night sleeping, eating, sleeping, eating. They eat a lot. They've got very little hearts that pump very fast, and they have a very high metabolism. Dancing queen. But the weasel, we've seen, yes, it worked. It popped up. This is from Artdatabanken, and we're now seeing over the last 5 years, which is not very long at all. So we can't take this as a trend, but we just can say that we're seeing quite the increase in, or a gentle increase in population records over the last 5 years. Whether this is a better scientific method at measuring and counting them and identifying and surveying them, or if it is a population growth, that is yet to be seen. but there have been some new tech and survey methods that have been brought out roughly in the last 5 years. We'll be talking about those at the end when we get to the tracking section. But where are they? These creatures, we don't know how many there are. Roughly there. So the polecat likes it less cold, apparently. He doesn't like it that cold. So he's hiding down here in the very, very south of Sweden. They have a population that spreads across the entirety of Europe, mainland Europe. The stoat and weasel, on the other hand, are everywhere. Now, I have seen, when I saw the wolverine, I was up here, up in Amanas. I was working with the Arctic foxes, and I saw weasels. Weasels. Can you tell the difference between the stoat and the weasel? We have these two species here, and they're quite similarly sized. One is bigger than the other, but they are quite similarly shaped and coloured, brown on top, white underneath. There are two particular factors you can look at. 3. 1, the size. If you see one of these creatures next to something you know the size of, you can kind of work out how big the creature is. Often enough, you'll just see it through the woods or through the grass, or wherever it is, and you won't get a good idea of its size. So, how do we split it? Okay, stoat. He has this big black tip on his tail, and his tail is longer comparatively than that of the weasel. The weasel looks like someone's taken his tail, chopped the black bit off, and left him with the rest. The black spot on the tail for our stoat friend. That's one. The other one, because you sometimes don't see the tail, if it's coming up out of a hole, you don't see its back end. What else? Okay. Bear with me on this one. It's going to be a little bit weird. We have our weasel here. Can everyone see the dot? Brown and white. And the divide between the brown and white is wiggly. It is not smooth compared to the stoat, which has a straight line. So, the way I like to remember this, when they're in their summer colours, and we'll come on to the winter colour in a second, stoats have a straight line, whereas weasels wiggle. You can throw in more poeticness or alliteration if you wish, but that works well for me. Stoats have a straight line, weasels have a wiggle. And that is the clear, defined way of separating these two species. If you just get you need a fairly good look to be able to see this, to be honest. The way they wiggle, everything's moving. But that's one of the key factors. I was going to talk about their white colourings. It doesn't like it. Play for me. Wait, I can't get my mouse off this. What have I done? Ah, there we are. There. Okay. What we're seeing now is one that I filmed on Sunday gone, literally 4 days ago. We were just north of Uppsala at Ulvakavarn. At this point, I realised my camera is massively out of focus, but indeed you saw something white and somewhat wiggly. Ah, there he is again. Now you can't see the tail. Ah, there it is. You just about saw the end of the tail. It's very difficult to see. He's moving so fast. He was at quite a distance. I say he, I have no idea. It was at quite a distance. It was the other side of a river. And they move so fast. I'm just going to play this for a little bit whilst I'm talking. I've got like 4.5 minutes of footage of which he's in. This stoat is in about 20 seconds total worth of footage. He's hiding for the most part. What he's doing is he's running along this bank and he's dipping into holes and he's having a little look around trying to work out who's there. Can I eat you? Are you small and edible? And he pops back up and runs to the next hole, dives down, has a look. And I should really remember to carry a tripod with my camera in future. Right. Come on, end on a good shot. Moving on. Moving on soon. Come on, where are you? I think I was saying the same thing on Sunday. How's a drink? So both stoats and weasels can have this white winter coat. They change their coats in the winter to camouflage from snow. The reason he was so visible was because he was white against a brown background. Now imagine if the snow had been around, probably wouldn't have seen him. And at that point, the only way to identify the difference is the black tip of the tail, unless you get a good size measurement. They lose all other colorings. Moving on, we've done the hungry, we've done the slippery, we've done the smelly, so now we need to talk about everybody else who didn't get put into one of those first categories. The pine marten, he's a lovely little beastie. Oh, and all the information's already there. Fantastic. So, pine marten, Maud, which is basically, that Maud is the, Maudure is the Swedish word for all mustelids. So, all mustelids are this guy. Look at the size of his ears. He's got this lovely colourful bib down his neck. That'll be very important in just a second. 1.5 to 1.7. He is not 17 kilograms. If you see one that is 17 kilograms, you're looking at probably a bear cub, actually. 1.5 to 1.7 kilograms in mass. They have a semi-retractable claw. They are the only mustelid with a semi-retractable claw, which makes them very adept at climbing trees. Using this, they can scramble up bark easier and climb on trees. And these guys, they do indeed live in trees. They prey on birds, amphibians, but predominantly squirrels. In Sweden, you have the red squirrel. Fantastic. Very interesting animal unto itself. The pine marten and the red squirrel have this long evolutionary history going back and forth. One hunting the other one escaping. It's a very complex evolution which they've gone through together, which means it's well balanced. The pine marten was lost from the UK for a long time, or at least thought lost, and efforts to reintroduce it to mid-Wales and parts of, I believe it was Shropshire, have shown that the grey squirrel, which we have in England, invasive from the Americas, which is so much bigger, fatter, and slower than the red squirrel, and spends more time on the ground, is massively susceptible to the predation of this guy. So this guy is doing a better job than any hunters and conservation organization ever could have in reducing grey squirrel populations and allowing the red squirrels to move back into what was previously their territory. Very cool. If you're interested in that, look up Pine Martens UK. I believe it's the Vincent Wildlife Trust, or it might be Shropshire Wildlife Trust. I forget. If you're interested, have a look. But they breed in July, and the implantation, which we had already with Wolverine, implantation was delayed by about 4 months. 7 months. So you have a fertilized egg rolling around, but not implanted, not growing, for 7 months. So the breeding is in July. At that point, then, the egg is implanted around the winter period, ready for a quick growth, a relatively quick growth, to then birth the kits, and again they're called kits, in the early spring. And as you can see from the map, they're everywhere that has trees, basically. All this area up here. Oh, hang on a second, now I don't have my laser. This is confusing. Right. All this area up here is obviously mountains, and most of it's above the tree line. So no trees, no pine martens. Very good. I said this bib was important. So let's talk about it. The bib is individually recognizable, as in each individual has its own unique fingerprint printed upon its neck in the form of that bib. So what they're doing, there is fantastic work being done in the UK to photograph pine martens' bibs so you can identify which animals are where. Using a series of camera traps, you get a very good geographic data set from this. And what they do, they have a stick in the ground, and on the end of that bendy stick, they have a metal ball like you put fat balls in for birds, and they fill it full of basically a fat ball plus some peanut butter, molasses, whatever that is. And then the pine marten stands up, grabs it, and a photo is taken of his bib. So this photo is actually from, I believe this is from the Mammal Society website, talking about exactly that. So these are a very cool animal. They've also got the biggest ears of all of the mustelids in Sweden, and I just think they're so adorable. I think all mustelids are adorable. I will point out now, they may be friend-shaped, they are not friend, do not cuddle. Because this guy looks like he wants to take you out for tea and crumpets. He does, doesn't he? He just looks like such a gentle gentleman. He's not. I have a badger here. This is a medium-ish sized badger. And what I want to look at is the claws. How fast can Danny go? Here we go. Look at the size of those claws. Yeah. Vicious. These guys have very strong, stable, stout claws. Stout is not notched down. Strong. Unlike our fingernails, which bend, unlike the claws of the pine marten, which are retractable, this guy digs. He likes to dig in the ground, so he needs claws like pickaxes. That's what he's doing. He's digging in the ground. They have set home ranges, and they are social and territorial. Right. They dig into the ground to make a nice complicated burrow system. It's called a set, and they can be anywhere between 35 and 80 meters in length worth of tunnels and chambers. They're very clean animals. They insist on removing dirty bedding and bringing in new bedding. And if you have a rather large set, say one of the 80-meter sets, you will have multiple families living in that set. Now, it has multiple entrances and escape routes, and there are normally annex sites nearby where they can, short distance away, basically go and sleep in the shed. They got that as well. Right. Winter sleep. Now, this guy, they can range anywhere between 7 to 13 kilograms in the spring and 15 to 17 kilograms in the autumn. So they can easily double their weight to some degree, 7 to 15. They can double their weight in the autumn. So 7 to 13 spring, 15 to 17 in the autumn. What they are doing is they are gorging, they are feeding, they are trying to get fat and full before the winter sleep. The dates I've got here on the winter sleep, October to April, that is the maximum extent that it could be done. Normally they'll sleep somewhere between mid-October, mid-November, and wake somewhere between March and April. So October, April is not the average length, that is the most extreme length of a winter sleep. It is said that in England, where the weather and the winter is warmer, they don't do a winter sleep. They may go to sleep for extended periods of time, go into torpor and just sleep for a couple of days if it gets cold weather. Here in Sweden, it's cold enough, they sleep. They do a deep winter sleep. The literature online was not referring to it as a hibernation, so I'm not certain what the difference is between a winter sleep and a hibernation, but I will refer to it as a winter sleep in case there is a specific difference. And yeah, he's a very fun little beast. Carl Linnaeus, the famous biologist who named many animals, originally put this into the genus Ursus, which is the same as bear, because of its digging and hibernating-like tendencies. It's actually been through something like 15 name changes. If you go onto Wikipedia for this guy, look at, you see Carl Linnaeus, Ursus, Melas, and then there's like 15 other names, and eventually we end up on Melas, the current name for it. And it is indeed, it's the largest mustelid we have in England, because it is heavier than a pine marten, but it is not the largest in Sweden, because obviously that is the wolverine. How's everyone feeling? Kind of give me some thumbs up in the room. Is that a lot of information? Oh no, I've got thumbs up. Good. Right. Then we're going to look here. Now I took again this picture from the tracking book that I've got, Urine Spa, and it has on it the footprints of all of the different mustelids we've been talking about today. Not all, most, in the Swedish names. So if you don't know what it is, go back in the video if you're watching this later and have a look at what the Swedish names were for each thing. Something I didn't mention in the very first slide when we talked about what is a mustelid is now present here. They all have 5 toes. This is not that common within the mammal groups. Obviously, we do. Humans, we have 5 fingers, 5 toes. I'm going to say apes and monkeys do. I believe they all do. I'll worry about that later. Mustelids do. Mustelids certainly do. They have 5 toes. And here is just a rough shape. Now, these are obviously, you can have a look in the book later, those in the room. There are differences between them. The wolverine has this really long, wide, segmented pad. The otter has the webbing between its toes. The badger looks like a good friendly handshake. And all of these guys look somewhat similar. So the pine marten, mink, polecat, stoat, and weasel, they all look somewhat similar, but they are the most similar looking of the groups. I'm going to throw this up here. This is a photo I took in Uppsala on the bridge by Cafe Rummet, if anyone knows it. I can't remember the name of the road. Of tracks. I said on the bridge, I've given it away. Oh well. So these are, I took from the bridge onto the frozen river, onto Fyrisand when it was frozen. Can anyone guess what it is? Who runs on rivers? I don't know if I can zoom in on this, can I? Oh, I have a magnifying glass. Can I use it? Haha. This thing is so clever. Right. Here we have the oh, now I've lost my pointer. Hang on a second. Can I have both? No. Oh well. We have tracks. And they are, there's a group there, there's a group there, there's a group there. It's bounding and jumping along. It's the otter, obviously. I'm going to do the zoom thing again to see if I can kind of show you. For those of you online and who can't see my pointer, because I can't have both the zoom and pointer, look between the toes and you'll see the webbing. You'll see the line. Can you guys in here see that? You can see. Don't worry about moving the camera down here. I'm just going to quickly wave. Here, there's a line between the toes. That's the webbing between the otter's toes. So that was very cool. And that was on the 15th of December. So we had, which was only a couple days after the river froze, we had otters right in the middle of Uppsala, right then, right there. So for those of you who go out tracking, I'm going to go back a slide, and you see something that has 5 toes, and it looks interesting, and you kind of like, oh yeah, it's got 5 toes, they're all kind of pointy. What's the next thing you need to look at? Well, then we're going to skip past my otters again, and we're going to look at, oh, that had an animation, tracks and signs. This is roughly, and I'm not going to go too deep into exactly this right now. This is how the footprints look when they're going in a line. So over here, this one on the left, this is the wolverine. He's a big plodding animal, and he's back and forth. Fairly similar to the badger, fairly similar to the pine marten as well. But it's kind of in a 2x2 fashion. This is kind of when it's moving along at some pace. Excuse me. Over here, with the slide in between, it looks like someone's been dragging a sled behind it, is the otter, because he's dragging his tail, or his belly, because they do. They walk, slide. And again, paired feet, bounding forward. And then this is the polecats, minks, stoats, weasels group. 2 feet, bounding forward. So, I have no idea what's going on. Right, there. So yes, you see these, and then you need to look at how they're positioned. And it's easiest in the snow. That's why I used this picture, because the snow is easy. You can do fairly well in sandy areas and on tracks. Human tracks, like not gravel, but like sand tracks in the forest. Those are a pretty good place to look. And look between trees. Most of these creatures will dive between cover. So if you've got a large open expanse, go around the edge of it. Look around the edge between the forest and the open, or like the cover and the open area. They'll be in that area. They don't like to be exposed for long, because they get eaten by birds. I didn't talk about the top predators. Birds, foxes, wolves. We have found wolf scat with badger teeth in last year. Yes. Right. More animations. What else was there? I went a bit too fast on that one, didn't I? Right, 44 minutes. Not so bad. It gives us some time for some questions, I think. That was the intro and breakdown of Mustelids in Sweden, the group found in Sweden. A bit about their ecology, what they do, what they eat, where they are, and how many, and what to look for when you're tracking. If you are out and about in the nature and you find mustelid tracks, you can take photos of them, use something as a size reference. Your hand in an L shape is a good marker. Put that around a track. A ruler, obviously good. Something with a defined size. I know in Sweden it is typically a snooze pot, because that is 7 centimeters, which is comparative to a wolf track. That's what they use. take pictures, and then you can log into places like Artportalen, which is the species portal in Sweden, and you can submit your photos, location, and date. All of this information helps because, as I said, there are so many species, including this little white one in the middle, who is a stoat. Pine marten, stoat, mink, and he's very colourful. Very helpful to get citizen science data. I'll leave it on questions. If anyone needs to get in contact with me in the future, there's my email address. And for those of you who are interested, Rovdjurföreningen Cubs, I hope I've spelt that right. I should have copied this. We have 2 events coming up which may be of interest. Wolf tracking and lynx tracking, let me know if you're interested. Any questions? I'm going to leave it back on this slide. I think they're prettier.
So we'll hand out a microphone and you get to ask your question in the microphone.
Thank you for an interesting lecture. I was wondering about the American mink, which is introduced from escapees, as I understand it.
Yes.
And do you know how long ago it entered the scene in Sweden?
No, is the short answer. I don't know when the first releases were. The mink being a mustelid is a very slippery animal. They're very difficult to hold and trap. They get out of anything you put them in. They're little Houdinis. So when the fur trade, when they started bringing American mink and breeding American mink for fur trading, I don't remember when that was, but there would have been escapees from almost immediately. I would imagine they're difficult things to keep hold of. The large releases, as I said, the population that was released, I need to go back and check the date. Where are you? Ah, there you are. Yeah, so that was... I don't know where I put that data. Doesn't matter. That, yeah, releasing 17,000 species. Oh, it's there. 17,000 in... Yeah, it says it escaped. They were released. There were conservation activists who were releasing this. I don't know when it started. It could have been as early... I think I've read somewhere something about 1960. But I don't know. But a long time. Long enough. Long enough that they are well established over the entirety of Sweden. And most of Europe now.
Can I ask a follow-up question? The European mink is no longer in Sweden.
Not as far as anyone's aware. We haven't found any traces of it.
Do you know since how long it's been gone from the country?
No. The ICUN red list, that entry that I was looking at, didn't have... Because it's concerned about the species across the entirety of Europe as opposed to per country, it didn't have extinction dates in local areas that I could find. The other data sets you can look at are the hunting data, and they didn't mention European mink at all. So I don't know when they stopped being shot by the Hunting Association or recorded to the Hunting Association. So trying to get species-specific information for one country I have found to be a little bit difficult. But again, I don't know.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for a good presentation, Andrew. I got a text message here wanting me to ask you a question, so here it goes. First of all, we have a very nice sweater on you today. And the question is, where is it most likely that we can spot these animals in Uppsala?
Yes. So in terms of spotting animals, your best bets, what you're going to have a highest likelihood of spotting, it's probably the badger. The badger, once they're in a location, they're pretty stable to one location. So once their location is found, and they like arable areas, they like being near farmland. They got a bit of open area with a lot of earthworms to eat. They eat a lot of earthworms and insects. So that's a pretty stable one. The thing is, none of these are particularly stable. The otter and the mink on the waterways, you have a fair chance, but I have been looking for otters for a long time and have yet to see one. Mink I have seen somewhat more recently, or certainly more frequently. So sticking to waterways in the spring, let's say April period, you've got a fairly good chance of seeing mink or otters with their young, with the young'uns who have popped out of their little holts and nests, swimming around. That's a possibility. And then the other encounters I've had with other mustelids, wolverines, stoats, weasels, polecats, they're all random. Sticking to edge habitats where you've got cover and a bit of open land, that's a pretty good place to be. But there isn't a set place that is good for them.
Considering the similarity of weasels and stoats, are they able to interbreed?
No.
Is there any documented case at all of any mustelid interbreeding?
I said no very quickly there. In terms of what I've seen of the records and the science, no. Obviously, the polecat, this pretty fella here who was then domesticated to make the ferret, they can interbreed. I don't know if it's a successful, like, full hybrid with breeding capabilities. I don't know, but they can, because there are ferrets who escape captivity, and you end up with a more ferrety polecat population. I'm going to say no, you don't get interspecies breeding in mustelids, mostly because they are so aggressive and they really don't like anything else. They're very solitary, they don't like things in their territory, and they tend to kill first, ask questions later. Biologically, could they? I can't answer, but likelihood in terms of behavior, they wouldn't.
Thank you. Do we have any more? We have a question in the... We have somebody saying that in the chat here, it's more important than ever that we learn about and take care of the animal ecosystem. Do you agree, Andrew?
Animal ecosystem, is that the wording they used? Yes.
Yes.
Great. Absolutely. Yes, we're in an interesting little period at the moment where people of Sweden, people of Uppsala, we're seeing a very big trend of people becoming aware of nature and starting to re-engage, re-enjoy nature, try things that are more sustainable. We're seeing more businesses lead towards a sustainable, attempting to be sustainable in their recycling and their power usages and stuff. So we're seeing good trends in that direction. Absolutely, it is important from an ecological point of view to protect the ecosystems. Obviously, there are big problems in the world at the moment, and we don't need to talk about the new coal mine in the UK. That would just be upsetting. Yes, it is important to protect our ecosystems. I'm not certain if I missed part of that question. If it was it how or was it why?
Was more of a statement, I think, than a question.
Okay.
But
Understood.
I think unless anybody else in the audience has any questions. Yeah, we have one more question here.
I was wondering about the otter, because it lives in the northern Sweden and also a little bit in the sort of south middle, but not in the middle and not in the south. And like, what is the reason for that it's not like a line in the middle and also in the south? Is it because of the environment or the... Yeah.
This little map here. Yeah, so absolutely, there is a blank space in the middle above, which, Dala Elva looks like it runs in, I think it's about that sort of area, isn't it? It's that big inlay and then comes across the country. So I have no idea what's going on up here. That would remove the otter from that population, from that area, unless it's just so sparsely populated that no one's surveying it. Data is only as good as the survey effort put in. So we could be looking at a missed spot, a black hole for data. It could be looking at if there's a particularly dirty waterway in that area. there are environmental factors that, of course, could limit their distribution. And dirty water is a massive one, because dirty water affects the size and health of fish, which obviously will affect the predators who consume them. What the particular reason for that gap is, I don't know. But in terms of gaps, it's data deficiency or environmental causes, such as dirty water, invasive species, human pressure, roads, cars, factories, hunting, etc. Yes, please.
So there was a clarification here. What can we do to help maintain animals' survival or animal population?
That's another lecture by itself, or a set. What can we do to protect animals and their world, their ecosystems? Great. Well, we can start with disturbance. A lot of these animals have a protection from the European legislation. They are free from disturbance. The badger, wow. And let's hear him again. The badger, particularly in the UK, is talked a lot about by consultants because they can't have it on building sites, but it's protected so they can't move it. If you're walking around the forest and you stumble across a badger set, you're not going to do too much damage. You're not going to be disturbing it much because they'll just hide underground and then they'll come out when you leave. It's if you continuously harass an animal, or trapping, hunting, of course, is within that same umbrella section of disturbance. But just casual disturbance. Enjoy nature, enjoy wildlife, love it, photograph it, see it, great. Don't hinder its natural life. There was a study done of a similar topic on Arctic foxes. Does human disturbance affect breeding rate? There are many of these studies going on. So for us individually, enjoy it, love it, photograph it, share it. Don't disturb it. Don't take things that aren't yours. So, yeah, there's a big thing about not collecting bird eggs. That's one of the big laws. Don't take things that aren't yours that could be disturbing. So don't, if you find a carcass that looks like it's been ravaged by a wolf and you're in Wolverine territory, fine, you can take the antlers, maybe. That's probably fine. That's not much, but don't take the whole thing away because they need that to eat. Other than that, contributing using citizen science data, contributing sightings, observations, things you see, tracks, sprints, all these sort of things. Give conservation groups all the information they can use, all the information you have, and just be nice to the animals. I think is the easiest way. It's the simplest message that we can all do something quite positive. Contribute data, don't disturb wildlife.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we might be out of questions. At least we're out of time for this, more or less.
Perfectly.
So unless anybody has a last minute question, I think we might wrap this up. And we will do so with a big thank you from us at Biotopia. And very nice presentation. And I enjoyed it a lot. I hope everybody else did. And I hope everybody watching online did as well. We had a few people watching at least. So,
very happy.
Thanks. And now you know how to recognize some of these tracks as well. So
yes,
this is just the start of experiencing these animals.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll have a chance to do a bit more in depth on the tracking and methods side of things in the future. Maybe. We'll see.
Perfect. Well, and with that, we'll say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Good night.